You jammed the T-stick into the roof of the car and pulled so hard your shoulder hurt. The gyro wheel screamed. The car hit the kitchen floor and shot across the linoleum like it had somewhere to be and was already late. It reached the far wall in under 2 seconds, and the front bumper popped off and slid under the refrigerator. Your mother said, "If you do that one more time, I am taking it away." You did it one more time. She did not take it away. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. You saw it in the store before you knew what it was. A plastic car about the size of your hand, bright yellow or red or blue, with a fat wheel in the middle that looked like it did not belong there. And sticking out of the roof, a slot, a narrow slot that went straight down into the guts of the car, where the teeth of the wheel were waiting for something to grab onto. Next to the car on the shelf was the T-stick, a flat plastic strip about 18 inches long with teeth on one end and a handle shaped like a T on the other. You did not need instructions. You did not need your father. You looked at the slot and you looked at the T-stick and you knew. You jammed the stick into the car and you pulled, and the wheel inside made a sound like a dentist drill crossed with a jet engine, and the car launched out of your hand and hit the store floor. A man in the next aisle said, "What the hell was that?" Your father looked at you and looked at the car spinning in circles by the greeting cards and said, "We are buying that." $3.95. That was the price of a Kenner SSP Racer in 1971. $3.95. A kid who returned bottles for a week could buy one. A kid who mowed one lawn could buy two. A kid whose family did not have much could still have one because $3.95 was the great equalizer. It did not matter what your father did for a living. It did not matter what street you lived on. If you were a boy in America in 1971, you had an SSP Racer or you were about to get one. There was no middle ground. You got your first one for your birthday or for Christmas or on a Tuesday when your father came home from work with a small bag and said, "I saw this and thought of you." 7 words, "I saw this and thought of you." And you opened the bag and the car was in a clear plastic blister pack and you could see the gyro wheel through the chassis and the T-stick was taped to the cardboard backing and you had it out of the package before your father took off his coat. You did not read the instructions because there were no instructions. You jammed the T-stick in the roof and pulled and the car left your hand before your father could say, "Wait, let me show you," and it hit the wall, and he looked at the scuff mark on the baseboard and looked at your face and did not say a word about the wall because he understood. Some things do not need instructions. Some things just need to go fast. Your model was your identity. That is the thing that nobody who did not grow up with these will ever understand. You did not just have an SSP, you had the Laker Special, or the Sidewinder, or the Blackjack, or the Cuda, or the Boss Hoss with the Mustang body and the ridiculous engine sticking out of the hood. And the model you had was who you were. Tommy had the Blackjack, Greg had the Railbird, Michael had the Super Stalker with the Plymouth Superbird wing on the back that broke off within a week because that wing was not built for the kind of abuse a 9-year-old could deliver. And you had the Laker Special. And the Laker Special was the fastest car Kenner ever made, and everybody knew it. 40 years later, you can still tell me who in your second grade class had which SSP, because that mattered. That was not a toy. That was a reputation. The pull was everything. The T-stick was 18 inches of flat-toothed plastic, and the harder you pulled it, the faster the gyro wheel spun and the faster the car went. Little kids with thin arms pulled gently, and the car rolled across the floor at a respectable speed. Big kids with strong arms ripped the T-stick out like they were starting a chainsaw, and the car hit the ground at a speed that should not have been possible for something made of plastic. You learned to pull with your whole body, you braced your feet, you held the car in your left hand and the T-stick handle in your right, and you yanked from the shoulder like you were pulling the cord on an outboard motor. The gyro wheel screamed, the car vibrated in your hand, you set it down, and it was gone, across the kitchen, down the hall, into the living room, under the couch, against the wall, into your sister's ankle. The car did not care where it went where the floor took it, and the floor took it everywhere. You raced at school, that was the law. Every boy brought his SSP to school in his backpack, and at recess, the hallway became a drag strip. 2 boys at one end, 2 cars on the floor, T-sticks jammed in. 3, 2, 1, pull! The cars shot down the hallway, and the kid whose car reached the far wall first won. If both cars hit the wall at the same time, there was a dispute. The dispute was settled by doing it again, and if it happened a third time, there was shoving, and the teacher came out and said, "Those things are not allowed in school." The next day, every boy had his SSP in his backpack again because no teacher in America could stop a 9-year-old from racing a car that cost $3.95. The gyro was the magic. You could feel it. After you pulled the T-stick and the wheel was spinning at full speed, if you held the car in your hand and tilted it, the gyroscope resisted. It pushed back against your fingers. It had weight that did not come from the plastic. It had force that came from somewhere inside the spin that you could not see, but you could feel it in your wrist, in your forearm, and you would wave the car from side to side just to feel it fight you. The G-forces of a toy car in the hand of a 10-year-old. You did not know the word gyroscope. You did not know the physics. You just knew that when you pulled the T-stick and the wheel was spinning, the car felt alive. It had its own will, and letting it go was like releasing an animal. Then Kenner made the sound. The first SSP racers were silent runners. The only noise was the gyro humming inside the shell. But around 1973, they added a strip inside the car that rubbed against the axle when the wheel spun and the car howled. A high-pitched mechanical scream that got louder the faster the wheel turned. You could hear an SSP racer 3 rooms away. Your mother knew the exact moment you pulled the T-stick because the house changed. The silence broke. That sound was not a feature. It was a declaration. I am playing, I am racing, I am 10 years old, and this car is the loudest thing in this house, and there is nothing you can do about it. The later models shot sparks. Kenner put a flint mechanism in the wheels so that when the car rolled across a hard surface, orange sparks flew out from under the chassis. In daylight, you could barely see them, but at night, if you turned off the lights in the hallway and pulled the T-stick and let the car go, it screamed down the dark hallway, trailing sparks like a tiny dragster at a quarter-mile track. And it was the most spectacular thing you had ever seen in your house after 10 p.m. on a school night. Your parents did not know you were doing this. Your parents were watching television. You were in the hallway in your pajamas, launching a spark-shooting car into the darkness and watching it disappear into a trail of orange fire, and you were absolutely certain that this was what it felt like to be alive. Then came the smash-up derby, and everything before it was a warm-up. Kenner looked at every boy in America crashing their SSP racers into each other on purpose and said we should probably make that official. In 1971, they released 2 cars designed to be destroyed, a blue 57 Chevy Nomad and a red 57 Ford, both pre-dented, both loaded with parts that were held on by clips instead of glue. Wheels, doors, hood, trunk, bumpers, all designed to fly off on impact. You and your friend stood at opposite ends of the kitchen. You each had a car. You each had a T-stick. You looked at each other the way gunslingers look at each other in westerns. 3, 2, 1. You pulled. The cars shot toward each other. And the crash was everything. Parts flew. The hood of the Chevy went left. A wheel from the Ford went right. A door hit the ceiling. A bumper slid under the table. The bodies of the cars spun out in opposite directions and came to rest against the baseboards with their guts scattered across the floor like a bomb had gone off in a parking lot. And you and your friend stood there with T-sticks in your hands and your mouths open, and the kitchen was covered in plastic car parts, and your mother appeared in the doorway with a look that could curdle milk, and neither of you said a word. Then you got on your knees and picked up every piece and clipped them back on and stood up and did it again, because the crash was not the end. The crash was the beginning. The picking up and putting back together and doing it again was the whole point. That was the lesson the smash-up derby taught every boy who ever played it. Things break. You fix them. You go again. The ramps changed the game. The smash-up derby came with plastic ramps that you set in the middle of the floor, and the cars would hit the ramp and go airborne before the collision. Cars meeting in mid-air, parts exploding at altitude, a wheel bouncing off the light fixture, a hood landing in the dog's water bowl. The ramps turned a crash into an event. You invited the neighborhood, 5 kids in the kitchen, 2 cars at a time. Winner stays, loser gives up his car to the next challenger. The kid with the most wins at the end of the afternoon was the champion of the block, and he held that title until the next Saturday when someone brought a fresh T-stick that had not been worn down by 3 months of furious pulling. The T-stick wore out. That was the tragedy. The teeth on the T-stick were plastic, and every pull ground them down a fraction of a millimeter. After 3 months of daily use, the teeth were rounded and smooth, and when you jammed the stick into the car and pulled, it slipped. The gyro wheel caught for a second, and then the teeth jumped, and the car rolled lazily across the floor at the speed of a sleeping dog. You stood there with a useless strip of plastic in your hand and the realization that the fastest car in the neighborhood was now the slowest. You could buy a replacement T-stick at the store for 75 cents, but the store was a bike ride away, and 75 cents was 3 days of bottle returns, and by the time you got there and bought a new one, your friend had already beaten your time record with his Sidewinder, and you spent the next week getting it back. You could identify a boy by the skin between his thumb and index finger. The T-stick had teeth on one side and smooth plastic on the other, and when you pulled hard and fast, which was the only way to pull, the toothed edge sometimes caught the web of skin between your thumb and your first finger, and it did not cut cleanly. It scraped. A line of raw pink skin that stung when you washed your hands and burned when you put them in your pockets. You did not complain. You did not stop. You pulled again, because the Lakers special was not going to launch itself, and Greg's Sidewinder was already at the end of the hall, and you were not going to lose to Greg on a Wednesday. One kid stuck the T-stick in his sister's hair and pulled. The gyro wheel caught her ponytail and wound it around the axle, and the screaming that followed could be heard at the end of the block. His SSP was banned from the house permanently. Another kid's car hit the baseboard at full speed, bounced backward, and struck his mother in the ankle. His SSP was banned from the house permanently. Another kid launched his from a tree fort to see if it would survive the fall. It survived. The tree fort did not. These were not tragedies. These were the stories you told at recess the next day. The kid whose SSP got banned was a legend. He had pushed the limits. He had gone too far, and every other boy in the class looked at him with respect because they had thought about doing the same thing, and he had actually done it. Kenner made them for 8 years, 1970 to 1978. Dozens of models, racers, dragsters, stock cars, motorcycles, a shark, a dune buggy, and a van with a Star Wars logo on the side. Each year, the cars got faster and louder, more chrome and more sparks. And each year, the boys who played with them got older. One year, the boy who had the Laker Special turned 13, the Atari arrived, the T-Stick went into a drawer, and the car went on a shelf. The hallway was quiet, nobody raced at recess anymore, and recess was for talking about other things now. The SSP sat on the shelf collecting dust, its gyro wheel still inside, waiting for someone to give it one more pull. Kenner was bought by Tonka in 1987. Tonka was bought by Hasbro in 1991. In 2000, Hasbro closed the Kenner name forever. The company that made the toy every boy in second grade brought to school in his backpack was dissolved into a conglomerate that did not know what a T-Stick was and did not care. Nobody made SSP Racers after that. Nobody made a smash-up derby. Nobody made a car with a gyro wheel and a ripcord that could shoot across a kitchen floor at a speed that made your mother question her parenting decisions. The toy disappeared, not gradually, completely. 1 year, it was in every house in America. 10 years later, it was in no store on Earth. You found one at a flea market last summer. It was sitting in a cardboard box between a stack of Life magazines and a broken clock radio. A yellow Laker Special. The paint was chipped, one of the fake wheels was missing, but the gyro wheel was still inside, and when you flicked it with your fingernail, it spun freely, and the sound it made was the sound of 1972. You picked it up, and the weight was right, the shape was right. You held it in your left hand the way you used to hold it when you were 9, and your right hand reached for a T-Stick that was not there. You bought it for $2, you drove home with it on the passenger seat, and when you got to the house, you sat in the driveway for 5 minutes holding a plastic car and remembering every race you ever won and every wall you ever hit, and every time Greg Sidewinder beat you down the hallway, and the time you beat him back, and the look on his face when your Laker Special reached the wall first and you did not say a word because you did not have to. The car said it for you. The T-Stick is still in a drawer somewhere. You know which drawer, the junk drawer in the kitchen, or the bottom drawer of the desk in your old bedroom, or a shoebox in the garage next to the nails your father never organized. It is in there with a dried-out pen and a rubber band and a key to a lock you do not own anymore. The teeth are worn smooth, the handle is cracked, but if you hold it in your right hand and close your eyes and pull it through the air, you can feel it, the resistance, the teeth catching, the gyro wheel spinning up in a car that is not there anymore, in a kitchen that belongs to someone else now. You can hear the scream, you can see the sparks, you can feel the car leave your hand and hit the floor and shoot into the unknown, and you are 9 years old and it is Wednesday, and Greg Sidewinder is at the end of the hall, and the T-Stick is loaded and the teacher is not looking, and you pull. What was your SSP? Was it the Laker Special, the Sidewinder, the Blackjack, the CUDA? Did you have the Smash-Up Derby? Tell us which car was yours and tell us who you raced against. I read every single comment.